topic that I'm going to cover in this lecture is types of communication. In layman's language, or in very simple words, if we have to define communication, we can say that it is sharing of thoughts, ideas, feelings between minimum of two people. Now let us shift to types of communication. Friends, there are broadly speaking three types of communication: verbal communication, written communication, and non-verbal communication. Verbal communication can also be called oral communication. Let us start with the first type, that is oral or verbal communication. So, as the name suggests, oral communication, or in oral communication, we talk, we exchange our ideas through the verbal form. Nothing is written down. Of course, in verbal communication, we do not talk about body language. So, the entire focus is on the spoken part. Spoken part becomes pretty important. Now, the important question that arises here is that why should there be emphasis on oral communication? Why shouldn't we concentrate only on the written word or the written component of communication? Friends, spoken part or spoken component of any language is very important. Why? Because historically speaking, human civilization has evolved through dialogue. For generations, we passed on information through the oral form. Through dialogues, we learned things, and we passed on knowledge from one generation to the other generation through that oral form by concentrating a lot on the oral component. If we talk about the modern day scenario, then in business world, for instance, when we work in offices, when people work in offices, relationships are established not through the written word but by the spoken word. People interact with each other, they come to know about each other, they try to understand the problems faced by each other, and then they try to find solutions to problems by talking to each other, not by writing. So the verbal part of communication skills is very important. Now there's certain subcategories, subtypes in verbal communication. I should not say subtypes, certain components is a better word. So first component, or the first important thing related to verbal part of communication, it is the pronunciation. And I must say that this is one part which is normally ignored. We just take it for granted that if we know the grammar of a language, then pronunciation will take care of itself. It hardly happens like this. So we at times we are in a situation wherein we mispronounce words badly, and because of it, the meaning part is lost somewhere. I can give you examples, but before that, another important thing: what will happen if we actually mispronounce words big time? Because some people say that the beauty of English language is that even if you mispronounce words, the other person, on majority of the occasions, will be able to understand what you want to say. If this is right, I partly agree with it, but if this is right, then why should we learn to pronounce words properly? Friends, if we mispronounce words big time, yes, chances will be there that the other person might not understand us. But there are other things that might happen. Of course, the impression won't be good. Much more importantly, our fluency might be affected badly. We might not be able to speak that well. Why? Because we mispronounce words. So this can happen. Of course, the third and one of the most important things, if we mispronounce words quite a lot and then we decide to interact with the native speaker of a language, then chances are that because of this mispronunciation of words, the native speaker of the language might not actually understand what we want to communicate. So I'll give you some examples. Hopefully the point will be clear. Okay, so let us suppose the word here is present. Now this word is pronounced in a different way as a noun and in a completely different way as a verb. So as a noun, it is present. I gave him presents. And as verb, it is present. The president presented a memento to the chief guest. So present is noun, present is verb. And if I'm not clear about this distinction and I just use one of these pronunciations in the wrong place, the overall or the end result might not be that good. It can be awkward. For instance, if I say that I gave him a present, sounds very awkward, isn't it? Okay, let's shift to other examples. A word like granite. 99% of the people in India will mispronounce the word as granite. I need some granite for my house. In the Indian context, yes, we can get away with it, but the exact pronunciation is granite. I need some granite for my house, not granite. Third example, anarchy. Again, majority of the people might mispronounce it as anarchy. Is it anarchy? It's not anarchy, it's anarchy. Absolute anarchy prevailed in the kingdom. So friends, we all should pay attention to the pronunciation part, because if it can improve our fluency, if the overall impression can be good, and of course, if the native speaker can understand what we say, I think it's worth the effort. So when we talk about verbal communication, we need to work on pronunciation for sure. The second important component of verbal communication is vocabulary. Now, our vocabulary has to be good. If we do not work on our vocabulary, we might not be able to express ourselves that well. Here, I'd like to emphasize one thing, that be it pronunciation or vocabulary, it is an ongoing process. I mean, you have to work on it continuously. If someone says that he or she can improve your pronunciation or vocabulary in 10 days, and after those 10 days there's no need for you to work on these things, he's telling you a big lie, trust me. So you have to go on working on it, and then only you remain in touch, and it's then only that you can express yourself properly. So I'll give you an example of how lack of vocabulary might create lack of understanding, or it might lead to difference between intended meaning and the realized meaning. Okay, let's have the example of word august. Okay, now if I use this word in a sentence and say it was an august gathering. Now let us assume that you've never heard this word used in this sense. You only know about the meaning of the word as name of the month. What might you believe? You might believe that I've used it in the wrong sense, isn't it? It was an august gathering. You might actually think that I've mispronounced the word also. I should have said August, and I've ended up saying August. If I insist that no, the usage is exact, the usage is correct, then what might you think? That maybe I do not know the meaning of the word and I'm using it in a totally different context. Or if you're very sympathetic towards me, you might have pity on me, and you might think that my English is not up to the mark, and all I wanted to convey was that meeting will be in the month of August. But in reality, I wanted to convey that the meeting had people who are very learned, who are very scholarly, who are experts in their own field. So these were the senses that I wanted to convey. So it is because of lack of vocabulary that some of the people might not understand the intended meaning, and the realized meaning will be totally different from it, leading to a major barrier. Now let's shift to the third part related to verbal component. It is intonation. Some of you might not be familiar with it, so I'll try to explain it in very simple terms. Intonation, friends, refers to rise and fall in our language, rise and fall in our pitch, I should say. Whenever we talk, we never talk on a monotone. We never talk at the same pitch. If someone tries to talk at the same pitch, his entire speech, his interaction will become very monotonous, very boring. it is through this rise and fall in the pitch that we attract the attention of the people. It is through this rise and fall that we can emphasize the points properly. So this rise and fall adds variety to our speech. So kindly do not ignore it. Broadly speaking, there are two types of intonation patterns in English: rising pitch and falling pitch. Of course, if we go into details, there can be others. So at this level, we'll just talk about two: rising pitch, I repeat, and falling pitch. What is the meaning of rising pitch? Rising pitch in English is used when we have to ask questions. Simply put, it means that when we reach the last part of the word, of the last word of the sentence, I repeat, when we reach the last part of the last word of the sentence, we increase the pitch a bit. A word of caution here: I have not used technical words like syllables, etc. here. So I'm using the word last part of the last word of the sentence. We increase the pitch. So compare these two sentences. Both are interrogative sentences, but in the first one, the pitch won't be right, and in the second one, the pitch will be right. So here we go. Do you have a motorcycle? First sentence, pitch is not right. The second one, do you have a motorcycle? So when I raise the pitch, when I reach this last part, cycle, it makes this utterance a question. So it is rising pitch used to ask questions. What is falling pitch? Falling pitch is used when making statements in English. So when we reach the last part of the last word of the sentence, the pitch comes down a bit. I'll be on leave today. I don't say I'll be on leave today. No, I'll be on leave today. So the pitch comes down, telling the native speaker that it's a simple sentence. A statement has been made, and one thought unit is over after this statement. So very quickly, a region of oral communication. Oral communication is important because most of the times we talk, and through talking we come to know about each other. Through talking we establish all our relationships. We don't write a letter to our friend all the time, isn't it? And then there are three components of oral communication, or verbal communication. It is pronunciation, vocabulary, and intonation.